People join organizations not just to sell, but because they want to develop, they want to learn, and they want to progress their careers. I look at everboarding as the concept that onboarding is not really where the learning and that journey starts and finishes, right?
Yeah.
It is continuous. I believe firmly that enablement is what really gets organizations to a world-class level of performance. And the alignment at the executive level with enablement to show that focus and the importance, that then brings it through the entire organization. How do you stay in the mindset of learning and developing yourself while you're still focused on delivering a number, right? So we talked a little bit about it. One is
Hello, everyone. This is Michael Ocean, founder and CEO of Sell Me the Spin AI. Today, I'm super pumped. I got Chris Bondarenko at the call. Look, Chris has been around for a long time. He's been leading teams as VP of Sales, Head of Sales, and now he's the CRO of North America at 360 Learning, which is an active player in the sales enablement space. And today, we're going to focus on chatting about the importance of everboarding and hear some perspective from an actual CRO. So, Chris, how's it going, my friend?
Yeah, Mike, good to see you. It's going well. Glad to hear I've been around and that I've earned the gray here. I appreciate that.
Of course. So, Chris, to kick it off, do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey? How did you end up in sales?
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. I actually, so I was in between my third and fourth year at university, and I'm very grateful I earned this internship at Reuters at the time before the Thomson Reuters merge. And I was at Reuters, I was a sales coordinator, and it was just a fantastic experience. And I was paired up with the head of sales of Reuters Canada. And I learned so much, and just the passion and the excitement of the pre-research, going to a sales call is just fantastic. And it was funny because I was doing a major in finance, and I wanted to get into stock trading. So when I went back to my fourth year of school, I dropped a few courses and took, sales 101, marketing 101. And, the rest is kind of history. I took the first sales job I could out of school. I've just loved it ever since.
I love it. I love it. Most of us got into sales very accidental, I guess. I never heard anyone say, hey, when I was a kid, I told my parents, yeah, I'm going to be a great salesman. So it seems like...
it doesn't happen. And the funny thing is, when you look at it, it's not one of the traditional paths when you're looking at university or college either, right? Like, it just doesn't really happen. And that's what makes it interesting. When you work with as many sales reps and teams as I have in my career, you end up getting exposed to a lot of unique individuals with very different backgrounds.
That's absolutely correct. Look, Chris, I know we are talking about importance of everboarding, and I'm super excited because you're in the seat, you're the CRO, your vision defines everything for the sales work. But, there are a lot of other CEOs in the market that don't really care about enablement as much as you do. And I just want to understand, from your point of view, why enablement is so important.
Yeah, great question. I think first is just to understand that people join organizations not just to sell, but because they want to develop, they want to learn, and they want to progress their careers. And so for me, my approach has always been as a revenue leader is that we need to provide the environment that facilitates that growth and that development. It also attracts world-class sellers and contributors. And so when you focus on that and you have that mindset, you get the right people, and then you're able to do really awesome things. Part and parcel of that, and when I look at some of the teams that I've built and the hyper growth we've experienced, is that you can only do so much growth by hiring externally, especially when you're looking at first line leaders. And what happens if you go external too much, you risk, it's a very risky proposition. You risk your culture, but you lose some of that tribal knowledge and the very important context and that wisdom within the organization that you start to build up. So I've always been a big fan of having that right process and that right enablement partner and that org in place so that you can develop and grow from within while you're also strategically bringing in the right talent externally as well too.
This is really interesting because, to your point, you cannot replace organizational knowledge. And also, you want to keep your culture, healthy. So when you bring people from outside, obviously, like people start freaking out. Do I have a growth path in this company? Am I going to stuck like in my SDR role forever, or as an AE, is it the only path I have, or can I, just actually move up the ladder and maybe explore other opportunities internally? So speaking of that, how do you see everboarding actually, helps? And before even that, what's even everboarding? What is it? Like, tell me.
Well, Wikipedia's no. Yeah, that's a great question. I look at everboarding as the concept that onboarding is not really where the learning and that journey starts and finishes, right?
Yeah.
It is continuous. And the development of world-class sales organizations and contributors is to constantly have that ability to engage with enablement, to learn, and to grow. And so everboarding to me is just that. It's the continuous repeat of new information, enablement, practicing, and really just getting to that next level. I think that the traditional approach that, hey, we're going to hire you externally, we're going to bring you in, and we're going to train you for 1 month, and then Band-Aid is ripped off, and you're out in the wild on your own. I think that's just a recipe for failure. And if you think back to sellers who fail, it's the ones who still think that way, and organizations and leaders who fail think that way too. It's just not the way that you can be successful these days. The world is dynamic. Sales tech, the tech stack is dynamic. You guys are a great example there. It's easier now more than ever, and you can do a lot more. And so it behooves us not to do it. So
that makes a lot of sense. And look, I had a conversation with a CRO a couple of months back, and she said, I made the biggest rookie mistake ever. I was like, what did you do? We hired some really top performing reps from Salesforce, and we thought they're going to pull it off with 2-3 months onboarding. But after 3 months, we had to let them go. And not only is it ugly, we had to actually, spend a lot of money and resources because they were selling, very complex enterprise, but they never sold into our industry. They have no idea about like what's happening in health tech. So we thought maybe if we, bring some superstars, we end up having, massive success. But again, I think for someone like yourself in your position, like because you've been around, you've seen this. And it's not just a fluffy rainbows and butterfly. We want to help people. We have a great culture. It's just it has a direct impact to your revenue. So you grow internally. You help them learn about everything that is happening within your company and also your industry. So it's always a better choice to promote within. Now, there are obviously some challenges when it comes to running an everboarding program. So one being, again, enablement not being aligned or this alignment between enablement and frontline managers. So there's always like, hey, we don't have time. We are running our sales org. We have to hit the quota. Enablement, you run the coaching sessions. You go watch call recordings. How do you solve these challenges as someone who oversees the entire sales org?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just quickly back to your comment about hiring out of Salesforce. I don't think it's a Salesforce thing. I think it's hiring from organizations that are already at such a level and a scale and have everything figured out, right? And so I've made the mistake as well too. You need to hire individuals who have been through what you're going through and at the stage that you're in. And the side note is I've hired out of Salesforce before, and what I end up hearing is a lot of like, oh, you didn't deploy your Salesforce instance correctly, which I probably have never done in my career. And I don't take that personally, but it's a bit of a thing. So yeah, hire at the maturity or that of your organization and look for similar when you're recruiting and you're bringing people on board. So I think going back to your question was like, I believe firmly that enablement is what really gets organizations to a world-class level of performance. And the alignment at the executive level with enablement and to show that focus and the importance, that then brings it through the entire organization. And so for myself, joining 360, for example, I have a phenomenal enablement leader. She's fantastic and a great team. And one of the first things we did was we aligned. Okay, what are we doing? What is the plan? How is that resonating? What does adoption look like? Do we have this true, I call it a culture of learning within the revenue? And how do we get to that point in lockstep with one another? And so, elements like launching a skills framework, which I can talk about in a little bit, or new product enablement. We just launched a new product here. That's like an example of when you have a learning mindset or a culture of learning within your revenue org, you're able to move quite quickly and hit your OKRs, and you're able to do unique things that might have taken otherwise multiple quarters to achieve.
That's very interesting. So you partner with enablement and empower them to basically have this, ability to be impactful for the entire revenue organization. So just walk me through some of the processes that you implemented within the company that other CROs can actually learn from you. So how should we even start looking at things? You started, with 360. Obviously, you inherited the team. You started working with enablement that is new to you. It's a new company for you.
Yeah.
Where did you start?
Yeah, great question. It starts with the people, and it starts with the right mindset. And so there was a lot of mindset work that I did when I joined, right? Like, how are we performing? How do we feel? What are our ambitions? What does world-class mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Or top shelf, what does that mean to you? And then how do we get there? And let's be honest about that. So having the right leadership executive in place, both in enablement and within the revenue org, and then just looking through, do our sellers have that mindset as well? Do they believe in it and buy into it? So it starts with your people and the structure. From there, I look at it like, well, what are our ambitions, and what are we trying to do here, and what kind of existing or what initiatives do we have? And so I'm getting at when I joined, we launched a new skills ontology, and we started with the sales reps, which was, here are the 3 critical skills, and then sub skills underneath each skill, proficiency levels, and what is the training that aligns to those different sub skills and proficiency levels. So we launched an ontology, which we're grateful to be able to do, because that's what our product does. And we have AI to help expedite that, right? AI is such an accelerant when it comes to enablement and what we can do in SaaS today. So the skills ontology, that launch, I co-launched that with enablement at our all hands. I personally signed off on it, and every month, the first 3 quarters here, we met monthly to review it with our coaches, and then our coaches, which are our first line sales managers, our coaches, then met and reviewed it with their ICs or sales reps. And so it took a new initiative with monthly meetups, executive support, a proper launch to show that the organization is behind it, and then incorporating that skills ontology and making it relevant to the day-to-day, and just connecting the dots even with performance. I mean, the biggest thing where I'm going is this has allowed us to be more proactive ahead of performance, right? We both know quota attainment is a lagging indicator of what's actually happening in the sales cycle. What's happening in the sales cycle is also a lagging indicator for the skills and the proficiencies of those competencies, which then allow them to perform, right? So we're going back and we're really building that out. So that's one example of what we've done here at 360.
I appreciate you sharing. Like, it seems like you have a great team and great culture, and it seems like you really applied your vision of having this, coaching, learning culture, and everybody's like following accordingly. Now, I want to talk about some of the common challenges we hear when it comes to rolling out this sort of programs. Like, one being, again, you have different seller personas. Obviously, not only they sell different things. Your SDR orgs, they're selling the meetings. You got maybe your more SMB sellers. You got more enterprise sellers that work on more complex deals. How do you deal with resistance from more tenured or more seasoned reps, if you will, when it comes to rolling out these programs?
The reps that we pay extra, that we hire from externally to bring their expertise and their tenure and their experience in, and all right, here we're gonna throw you the biggest deals of demand gen and hope things go well. Those reps, look, I think it starts with it goes back to the right people with the right mindset, right? And again, I've made mistakes where I've trusted the big seller from my primary competitor. I brought them in and kind of said, all right, go for it. At 360, we have a unique culture and a unique way of doing things. And to be successful at our company means adapting to that process and to that culture, and then bringing your own unique flair and experience to kind of round that out. So the right people and the right mindset. From there, it's all about, to me, it's about relevancy. And this is something that we test a lot on our platform, is how relevant are the courses and the content. And how you get relevant is you number one, you don't say, okay, these courses must apply to everybody, because you're right, there's different functions and there's different levels within an organization. So relevancy is very important. Also, too, is, are we just going top down? Are we saying this is coming from quote unquote corporate and just being pushed down? It's like compliance and onboarding training that you just push down. Some of it makes sense, but to establish that culture of learning and get buy-in from positions at all levels, you need to make sure you're relevant and that you're developing content with your subject matter experts or with your top performers. And so one of the things that we really preach at 360 Learn is the concept of collaborative learning, which is, hey, let's figure out what your peers are doing, what your top learners or top performers are doing, and learn from them, and find ways to mirror those skills and those competencies. And then how do we share that? How do we socialize that internally and create a dialogue? Again, so it's not just a one-way or a top-down element there. The last point, which is what I really love about your organization, is the concept of practice. What I find happens a lot in a sales org is we have a big deal, experienced seller, and it's a team-based sell. So you've got like someone from services, product, and your solution engineering. You're like, all right, so this is what we understand about the customer or the prospect. This is what they want to do. This is our product. Here's where we are aligned. Here's the gaps. All right, what's our strategy? We develop our strategy, and they're like, all right, go ahead and execute. And the gap between strategy and the execution, to me, is practice. And so right now I'm really focused, I'm encouraging, all right, let's practice. How are we going to role play this out? How do we envision this strategy being executed? And so I think that's like a big one too. Those are the ones that I think are really important. And speaking with you has really motivated me. Like, hey, how do we practice? We're not practicing at scale yet because we're not a customer, but I think that that's just such an important element there.
You're very on point. Like the reality is, you can show people all the materials in the world, talk about their peer performance, share best practices, even bring experts from your customer base. But the problem is, if you don't practice, you don't build that muscle memory. And you go inside the ring and you get surprised, you get punched in the face. I always like to use this because it resonates a lot. You read something on LinkedIn or a book or watch a video and you think, oh, I'm an expert. Let's get on a call and let's try to apply it. But if you've never been in that position or situation, you're most likely going to practice on your clients. So why not just doing it before, so you don't burn that lead?
It's like, hey, we're gonna let you warm up or practice on some of these leads before we give you the good ones. Like, why even think about that? Why not practice properly?
Look, I had that experience. It resonates a lot. Like I started, it was a decade ago. I was selling Azure and Office 365. That was the case. Here's bad leads. Go call them. What? I'm going to just get hang-ups. It's not going to work. But I guess that was old days. Like, things are changed massively. And I think companies have started to look at practice and enablement completely differently right now. It's about mostly like individual practice, individual coaching, really focus on the specific needs of each seller rather than one size fit all. And let's just, shoot things on the wall and see what sticks. Let me ask you a question about what you just said about partnering up with some of your high-performing reps and not, only just have this vision from top to bottom, but let's really get people involved in building this material and practice and learning, basically sessions. One of the challenges I keep hearing is that, look, most of my high-performing reps don't want to get involved. They want to help, they're great people, but they're high-performing reps. So maybe it's better just to leave them alone and let them do their job. Maybe we shouldn't distract them. Based on your experience, how should we even assess which one of our high-performing reps might be a great fit to get and partner up with when we are building this programs internally?
Yeah, great question. And so this actually, we get asked this a lot because we're huge believers, as I mentioned, at 360 here at leveraging your top performers and your SMEs. And those folks prioritize relentlessly. They control their schedule and agendas. and how you identify them can be a challenge, but usually they're open to speak up, and there's data that helps you identify who the people are. The next is like, well, how do we convince them to take time away from selling, or if it's a product manager, from developing or managing the team? How do we convince them? And this is really where AI really comes into play, and we see it here at 360. LMS or learning systems all preach, hey, AI. But if you don't connect the dots to AI with efficiency and real value, then you're just saying what everyone else is saying. Mm-hmm. And so what we say is, well, with the power of AI, we can take your SME or your top performer, and in under 3 minutes, they can create a course on what makes them special and unique. Mm. And then you can take that course, you can soft launch it, or you can share it with your executive or leadership, or your enablement lead can go through it. Quick feedback, make a few adjustments, add in perhaps a quiz, add in some visuals, and then you're good to go. So the idea is that AI helps to enable or helps to accelerate your enablement and creating that groundswell of real meaningful content. And so when you're creating when your peers are creating content who are top performers, it behooves you not to take that course. And especially if AI is recommending that course or that content to you based on inputs on like your skills performance, where you're strong, where you're deficient, or based on your learning path or your career projections or your aspirations. So AI to me is the answer, and that's how it connects the dots. And it really, again, it just accelerates the move of an organization to become really that culture of learning, or to be learning oriented.
Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai. This sounds like a really powerful functionality. You said in 3 minutes they can build a course. So it means like the time commitment is not as crazy as it might sound, because before we used to build things on Notion when I was working, with startups. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. Can you share a little bit more, like how these modules actually work, how 3 minutes, recording can actually turn to a course?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. So like, without getting into the details of it, because I'd have to show you a demo, and that's not our purpose today. The ability to take content and load it, or pull in topics and prompt, and then to hit generate. And it's really that simple. But, to go through it before you publish, to make sure that you have, do you want survey questions in there? Do you want content in there? Do you want breaks? Do you want to incorporate video, for example? Take like, hey, if we're doing something on objection handling, I can go and grab a snippet from one of my Gong recordings and pull that in on how I handled a certain objection. Or one of the things that I see really differentiates high performers from those who maybe struggle, and we have this in our skills framework, is the ability to control the sales cycle and to help to control the decision criteria and next steps. So how do you finish your calls? How do you set upfront agreements at the beginning of your calls, right? Mm-hmm. And so we can pull some of those examples in from Gong. But all this to say, it is just a few clicks. And I think, honestly, that is starting to become table stakes. Mm-hmm. Within the next year, you're starting to see organizations say, okay, AI is great, it's here. How do I translate that into value for my customers? And in 360's case, it's the L&D, the admin, and then it's also all of the learners within that organization. And how do they upskill, reskill, develop, and become more successful?
Mm-hmm. I love this. But let me share a personal, story with you. So before starting Sell Me the Spend, I was part of the early sales team at Hopin. So I joined a company really early on, we were building the V1 playbook. So we didn't even have sales managers or, VP of sales per se. At that time, I was willing to spend time, go on Notion, whatever I learned, added there is startup, right? And as part of being a
Hmm.
founding, sales team, this is part of your job. It's being communicated. You help build that playbook. But at some point, when we, grew up to Series B, Series C, things got, different. You see more competitors, you see more sellers, you're competitive, and I was, high performing in my role. And at that point, I remember, although I really wanted to do this stuff, I had to prioritize. I still care about my
Hmm.
numbers, my performance, the most because I'm a seller. I want to be the seller. So yes, I want to help, but what's in it for me? Like what's in it for me at 360 as a high performing reps to say, all right, even 3 minutes or playing around with the tool, what
Hmm.
motivates them to really actually help you build these programs?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I've been at organizations where hyper growth, and that's awesome. You had that experience in that ride because it's a very different organization. And kudos to you for being a top performer and going through that because it can be challenging, right? Um, how do you stay in the mindset of learning and developing yourself while you're still focused on delivering a number,
Hmm.
right? So we talked a little bit about it. One is understanding and having the mindset that how I'm learning and what I'm doing today is going to help me tomorrow, and it's very much a leading indicator,
Hmm.
right? My performance, my quota attainment's a lagging indicator. So there's that. You need organizational buy-in. You need the alignment from your leadership and enablement. Those are big. But for me, we use peer motivation. It's like, well, this is what your peer group's doing.
Hmm.
This is what the rest of your colleagues are doing, and this is their completion stats, this is their adoption of learning. Here we just launched a new product in the market, and once a week we showed the completion of that enablement program for the new product,
Hmm.
and we said, oh, by the way, you can't really sell that new product until you complete the enablement. So that's like the other way around it. But it's like, okay, if my peers are doing it,
Hmm.
this content is also generated by my top performing peers.
Hmm.
And then there's the relevancy factor. And every piece of content in 360 for all of our customers, we do ask those questions. How relevant was this? Are you going to use it again? So we help our customers identify the most relevant and useful content so that they can also adopt our approaches here at 362.
Very interesting. So, a follow up question on that. Obviously, you have this learning mindset yourself. You're a CRO, big boss here, but you're learning with the organization. I believe you have this startup mindset that I'm learning with the team. So, share maybe one or two examples of maybe mistakes that you've made rolling out some of these programs and how to avoid them, or what you learn first and foremost from them, and how other leaders or maybe earlier in their journey can avoid
Yeah.
not making those mistakes.
So I don't think we have enough time to go through all of the mistakes I've made in my life or in my career here. There's been a lot, right? There's been a
Pick the
lot.
top one.
And yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to answer this a little bit backwards. What do I do today to make sure I have the learning mindset? So I read quite often. There's a lot of books here. Right now, one of my favorite books I'm rereading with one of my leaders is The Coaching Habit.
Hmm.
So I think reading is extremely important. Networking, being part of communities, talking to people, learning. I mean, you and I have been able to connect, and it's been great. So there's that, and it's honestly, I actually have next to me here a small chessboard, and I always think like I've got to think I'm playing chess, not checkers. Like things are not linear. A step backwards might be two steps forward in another week, right? And so I think that a lot of, again, that's mindset and how do you keep yourself in that position. There's a lot of concrete examples of mistakes I've made. One of the early mistakes I made was losing track of DE and I.
Hmm.
And a very healthy revenue organization, especially sales, you have DEI covered. You have different perspectives, different backgrounds, and you just have a unique team-based atmosphere there. And I lost track of that. And I'm grateful for this. My manager at the time, my leader, he said, Chris, you got DEI an issue in your team. let's fix this. Let's find out how to do this. We're getting feedback that you're not as aware of it as you need to be. And that's crippling because I thought I was doing great, but I wasn't fully aware of it. So what did I do? I did some reading. I got introduced to some leaders. I got involved with Women in Tech Sales and Girls Club to be a mentor. And I took a course actually to be more aware and how to be a proper ally within the working environment. And as a result, one of the other initiatives in the workplace that I championed as a founder and then an advisor was a Women's Alliance ERG that we built. It won some awards during my tenure while we were there, but we built a very intentional effort. So for me, I embraced the failure. I learned, I researched, I networked, I got involved, and then I took a very public and very visible step to address that. And so now, and you look at my LinkedIn profile, I'm an advocate of diversity, and I'm much more aware of it now than I was before. And so that's one that I'm extremely grateful for, and I learned a lot. The next one was the importance of enablement and understanding what your revenue org can handle and cannot handle. And so the story from this, the background on this is a fantastic company. We launched, as part of our growth strategy, I think it was 5 new products within 2 quarters. And simply put, that was too much for my revenue org to handle. And I was on one of the ones saying, yeah, let's get more products to sell. Let's increase our deal size. Let's increase our differentiation. And let's give our account management team more to upsell and expand and add more value to our customer base. Turns out it was a little bit too much all at once. And so what we saw was our sales cycles were getting a little bit long. We were saying inaccurate information. What we were presenting wasn't necessarily matching what was happening in contracts, and procurement folks picked up on that. And so, the big learning for me is like, hey, let's keep in mind that, and this goes back to the point, is like the primary role for a sales or a revenue organization is not to just be taking courses and not to always be learning. There needs to be that balance there. And so understanding what your organization can handle and can take is very important. And it's funny, it's great timing. We're in the middle of Q4, right? We at 360 will not, and we should never ever think about launching any new enablement programs at the end of the year, especially Q4 and in December. So we know we want to have a no-fly zones there. So that's like one of the results of that learning as well.
Look, I love this conversation because of how open you are. And I had another great leader on the call the other day, Darren Hall, good friend of mine, and he said the same thing. He said, look, great leadership is about being absolutely open about your vulnerabilities and noticing those problems, even just share those problems and try to fix them. And it seems like you walk through this, challenges, and you face your own, mistakes or failures or whatever we call it. I don't like to call them failures, like learnings, and actually turn to be part of your journey right now. Like I see you're super active about what you went through right now. You're part of Girls Club right now, and all this thing shows great leadership, and I appreciate you sharing. I typically ask a last question, but you really finished it on a high note. I don't want to ruin it because it was great what you just shared. Really do appreciate you, Chris. If anyone wants to reach out to have a conversation with you, first and foremost, can they and how?
Yeah, of course. So I think LinkedIn is the best. You can just find me on LinkedIn. Shoot me an email. I think my email is connected there. That's the best way. DM me. There's certain things that I'm always looking for. So a few things that are big to me: mentoring, advising early stage startups. Those are really big passions of mine. Also, too, I'm always looking to connect and speak with talent. My approach to growing teams, especially hiring externally when I do, is I don't want a job rec to go out and then for us to take 3 to 4 months to find the right person. My view, and I've aligned very well with our talent acquisition team here, which is fantastic, is we already should have a talent pool. We already should know who could be our next new hires in the enterprise segment or in the mid-market segment, for example, or on the BDR team. we should already have those folks identified and in our ecosystem speaking with us. So anyone who wants to speak with me about current or future opportunities here at 360 to join the rocket ship, happy to do so as well.
Amazing. Chris, thank you very much for taking the time. I really love the conversation. Guys, hope you enjoyed it as well. And until next time, see you soon. Bye for now.